Nasri and Asma for organizing this event, and for John, who suggested my name. And I just want to tell you how I actually knew John. He didn't know me when I knew him. I was a student at Princeton, and I played squash. I used to see him twice a week. We played on a regular schedule. He played before me, and I played right after him. So every time I met him in the locker room, I would be putting on my squash outfit. He'd be coming out of the shower completely naked. That happened for about 1.5 years. And then he left, he went to the AUB. I still have not seen him before, until that time, fully clothed. So many years later, I finally was introduced to John formally. He was surrounded by a bunch of professors. And I was very tempted, but I took him on the side and I told him, I'm very tempted to tell everybody, Professor Waterbury, this is the first time I see you with your clothes on. I didn't think people would understand exactly what I was referring to. Anyway, Nasri has been supplying me with zaja, with the ara the whole night. And I have been thinking, scribbling something that I could say. Now, because this is really off the cuff, I might stutter through it. I might not find the exact rhyme, but I'll try. Okay. عملوا أحصى في لبنان. عملوا أحصى في لبنان تيشوفوا مين الفهمان. عملوا أحصى في لبنان تيشوفوا مين الفهمان وينقوا نخبة رياس يتولوا أمور الإنسان. النخبة طلعت بالمية 100 على الطائفية. درزي و3 إسلام و3 مسيحية. لكن بين المغتربين أهل القدرة واللمعة وين ما كانوا مجتمعين بيطلع عراس الجامعة 195 خريج الأمريكية. So for something more serious now, I want to start with a word and expound on it. The word is imagine. I'm going to pull my glasses out so I can read. Imagine a nation whose citizens clean their environment instead of polluting it, who rely on scientific truths to make critical decisions instead of invoking dogma, superstition, and astrology, who seek the benefit of the collective instead of the advancement of the clan, and who contribute to universal knowledge instead of regional conflicts. Imagine a nation that attracts foreign brains instead of letting go of its own, whose universities are not just good schools, but also house world-class research centers, and that is not only a welcoming place for tourists, but also a preferred locale for international scientific conferences, and whose youth is educated and equipped to participate in the world's most exciting intellectual adventures. I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, could Lebanon one day be such a nation? History has taught us that when nations step out of years of wars, ruins, and conflicts, they are particularly well suited to be uplifted by grand projects, grand, inspirational, wide-reaching, galvanizing, and transformative projects involving the most advanced science and engineering, and inspiring and engaging young and old from all walks of life. I will argue in front of you that Lebanon today, despite the recent rumors of looming doom, Lebanon is ripe for such grand projects, which would transform its society from one that is consumerist and money-based to one that is productive and knowledge-based. Allow me first to tell you what I mean by grand projects and why I believe that they can play a revitalizing role in making Lebanon the small nation that could. After I do so, I will undertake the exercise of imagining with you a few such grand projects for Lebanon. So first, I'll start by giving you two examples of what I mean by grand projects. 48 years ago, on May 25, 1961, President John F. Kennedy told his nation, "I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth, because in many ways space travel may hold the key to our future on earth." Indeed, within a mere period of 8 years, as well as we all know very well, the Apollo program led to an American landing on the moon. And what many people do not realize fully is the impact such a grand project has had on our lives today. Many of the inventions and discoveries made by engineers and scientists associated with the Apollo program have found their way into our homes, our kitchens, hospitals, clothing, cars, and computers. These include materials, machines, and techniques which we take for granted and which enhance our standard of living, improve our healthcare, and facilitate our daily lives. As just two examples out of many, the water purification technology developed by the Apollo spacecraft is today employed in several spin-off technologies to kill bacteria, viruses, and algae, and reduce lead in water supply systems, as well as in filters mounted on home kitchen faucets. The second example is the kidney dialysis machine used today in medicine to provide an artificial replacement for a lost kidney. Trace their development to the chemical process NASA scientists and engineers developed to remove toxic waste on the Apollo spacecraft. No one in 1961 could imagine the full impact these yet-to-be-made inventions and discoveries would have on the lives of future generations. More important, I believe, the immense inspirational role that the Apollo program has played in intellectually energizing and inspiring thousands of young scientists and engineers, and positively impacting science, technology, engineering, and math education for decades in the US. In 1961, the year President Kennedy challenged his nation to land a human on the moon, the total number of PhDs earned in the entire United States in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math combined was less than 1,000. By the time of the last landing on the moon, only a decade from that date, that number had increased by an astounding 340%. More than 100 departments in engineering and science at American universities trace their origins to that period when young Americans from all classes of society were inspired by the Grand Apollo project to pursue careers in the sciences and engineering. The excitement was not limited to the US, as many young people around the world left their home countries to study in technical fields in the US. I'm a living example of the inspirational power that the Apollo Grand Project had on young people around the world. Growing up in Tripoli, Lebanon, during the Apollo era, I was fortunate enough to have had inspiring parents and teachers who allowed me to dream of participating in the space program. I was lucky enough to be able to go study and later work in that field in the US. Let me now give you a second example of a grand project. More than 1,000 years ago, the Abbasid Caliph Al-Mu'tasim, a visionary not unlike John F. Kennedy in his support of exploration, and perhaps not unlike Daniel Bliss, launched another sort of grand project for his nation in the year 836 AD. He announced the establishment of a grand research center for anatomy and surgery on the banks of the Tigris River in Baghdad, and supplied it with a vast collection of apes and mammals for comparative study and dissection by some of the greatest medical scientists of his day. The center quickly became a beacon for some of the brightest researchers in the field of anatomy and attracted the likes of Al-Kindi and Ibn Masawi, who used the center's apes to study many anatomical problems that led to his seminal treatises on ophthalmology and his famous book of aphorisms, the Latin translation of which was very popular in Europe during the Middle Ages. When today, more than 1,000 years later, we ask, what was Al-Mu'tasim's greatest contribution to humanity's progress? The answer, I think, is not his famous invasion of Amuria, but rather his grand visionary project, that research center he founded on the banks of the Tigris. Similarly, 1,000 years from now, when students of history look back at the great achievements of American civilization in our age, one of the high points will not be its invasion of Iraq and the landing of his troops on the banks of the Tigris, but rather the Apollo program, the landing of a human on the moon. Now that I have defined what I mean by grand projects, and before I undertake the fun exercise of imagining with you a few lofty and ambitious projects for Lebanon, I would like to address the relevant question. Is Lebanon really equipped to undertake world-class scientific and engineering grand projects? As a scientist working in the US, I have had the pleasure and privilege to meet over the years and all over the world an astounding number of truly outstanding scientists who are Lebanese expatriates, or of Lebanese origin. Almost every field of science has such Lebanese at the top, and many of them are recognized superstars in their respective fields, having garnered some of the highest distinctions and made numerous contributions to advancing various technologies and the natural sciences. Lebanon is a small country whose disproportionately immense intellectual export to the world, as can be seen around this very room, has benefited many nations, but has remained untapped and unleveraged for the service of the country from which it originated. Alas, most, if not all, of the brilliant Lebanese scientists I have met have little, if any, professional connection to Lebanon, its scientific institutions, or its resident scientists, and despite their notoriety in the scientific world, they have remained virtually unknown in Lebanon.